radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Welcome, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. Let's do this, man. Yeah. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What a week. It's a short week, though, here on Fade to Black. Short week. No show on Thursday. I'm having some electrical stuff done to the house. And I'm going to be down for about 24 hours or so. And so there just isn't an opportunity for me to work on Thursday day, and will bleed into Thursday night. And then they're going to finish up everything on Friday morning. So, I've requested that somehow my refrigerator can somehow stay on or be shut down the least. So that's a whole nother situation. But anyway, no show on Thursday. Last night, Dave Beaty was with us talking about his new film, The Consciousness Connection. An amazing show last night. Dave is such a good filmmaker and producer and director. Tonight, Grant Cameron is back with us, UFOs and government secrecy, all that stuff. And then tomorrow night, Ross Coulthart is with us. And I'm calling tomorrow night's show Our UFO and UAP World, which I could have done that with Grant Cameron tonight. I could have called both shows. I could have called all three shows the same thing. I should do that. I should do that 1 week. Have each guest with the same show titles. Yeah, that would be great. Just let me mention this because I have something to say real quick. I have 4 major events coming up, starting with next weekend, not this weekend, but coming up in 2 weeks. Today's the 15th. Coming up in 2 weeks, I'm heading to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities XPO. That is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Delavan, Wisconsin, at Delavan Lake at the resort there. Chris Bledsoe, Scott Walter, an amazing list of speakers that are going to be presenting. I'm hosting, and I'm also going to present. Yeah, I'm going to get up there and have a little chit chat on Friday night. We've got a UFO Skywatch VIP thing with Chris Bledsoe. Also, we've got a really cool special event that we're doing where I get to take a seat with Chris Bledsoe on stage and just have a conversation. And that's going to be great. So get your tickets for the Contact Modalities Expo. It is next weekend in Wisconsin. Links are below. And then I come back for a Contact in the Desert a couple of weeks later, May 29th through June 2nd in Palm Springs, California, in Palm Springs, obviously. Links are below. Then I head south to Peru for the Inca Celebration of the Sun with Brian Forrester. This tour is sold out. But we do have a second tour coming up in November later on this year. So, again, change your life. Go to Peru. You know you want to go to Peru with me. All right? So, change your life. Come to Peru and Bolivia with us. It's amazing. Then I come back to the States for the Psy Games, the Psychic Olympics. I'm a game show host. This is August 1st through the 3rd. 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. First conference of its kind, right? A psychic Olympics. We have judges, we have speakers, we have presenters. It is just going to be an amazing weekend. And you never know, right? This is a competition. If you win a game at the Psychic Olympics. What happened? What happened? I cannot wait for this. It's going to be amazing. Now, I just wanted to mention this. I'm not going to say who, what, where, or when. Can't do that, obviously, because you're going to find out right now. I got a friend of mine reached out to me last year, and somebody outside of this community, from the music industry. And I hadn't talked to him probably in about 10 years, but my number's the same and everything. Anyway, so he calls, and it was great to hear from him. And I could tell that he wanted to talk to me about something. And it became apparent that he was aware of what I was doing. And this is last year. And so forth, been following me a little bit. So he calls me last year, and it was just like this weird phone call where he was alluding, but he never got to the point. Since then, he's let me know what he's wanting to talk to me about. And I'm going to say, it's pretty bizarre. It's pretty bizarre. I can't say anything else than that. As this starts to unfold, I may tell you more, but this is back to a point that I make a lot. People outside of our community wonder about what is going on, not only with UFOs and UAPs, of course, but contact, ET, what is in our skies, life in the universe, what could be here, and what does the government know? And this is outside of our community. And when somebody reaches out to me that I've had a relationship for 20, 25 years with, and not about these subjects, and I know what they do professionally, right? It's just like really straight. And to come, it's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just our bubble. Okay, we're in a bubble. This UFO community, we're in a bubble. Me and Grant Cameron are standing inside of this bubble, looking around, and we have our life here, right? But outside of that, what do they do? Do other people, the normies, right? Do they think about, well, you know what? They do. Do they have their own experiences? They do. They don't necessarily, if ever, make their way into this community. No, they stay on the outside. When they have a friend that they trust that is inside of this community, and somebody like myself, then they will reach out. And that's what's going on. Now, what is it? I can't say, but it's very interesting. I'm going to leave that right there. Tonight, Grant Cameron is with us. We're going to be talking about those UFOs and UAPs and government secrecy and the current state of our UFO community and what is going on. He is a researcher of the year. Yes, he's that. Books, documents, FOIAs, and of course, he was central in the Wilson Davis document leak and bringing that out to the public, along with yours truly, I might add. And I would like to welcome all the way from the Great White North, the one and only Grant Cameron. He's right there. Grant, is there your opinion, you're a bigger troublemaker in the UFO community than Grant Cameron?
Well, I was thinking, I actually made a list. I'm the only one that's actually really leaked the document. I leaked the Wilson leak document. I leaked the alien autopsy document, which I thought was the bigger document. It didn't get any traction. Mm-hmm. I leaked the notes from the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group. I leaked the notes from the channeling of an alien at the CIA in 1959. I released the documents on the UFO study for President Johnson. I released the notes from the Douglas aircraft study in 1968, $500,000 study on UFOs. And I'm going like, what is everybody else doing? Because the Wilson leak document, you probably know, there was a lot of researchers who were sitting on this document. They'd had it for 10 years and they didn't do anything. And I guess because I don't have a big career to lose or anything. It was sort of like when I saw the document and realized this is the real deal, because of the fact that Eric Davis's name was on there and Oak Shannon, I just figured like I got to get this out. So to me, it's always been like a game of try to figure it out. And then it's like the Bible says, what profit of the man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? So it's the idea is like, what difference does it make if I figure it out and I don't tell anybody? I just joined the cover up. So I've always been interested in trying to get it out.
Yeah. And not to kick a dead horse, but let's stay on the subject for just a brief second, because this is more fun and crazier than most people realize. Unbeknownst to me and Richard Dolan, about, let's see, the Wilson Davis, that was 5 years ago. Okay, so let's back up. About 5 years before that, Dolan said, I think he said it was 2017, but I asked Richard one time on the show, I said, so Richard, Grant, can you pull the microphone a little bit further away from your face? Yeah, we're getting your breath.
Yeah.
Okay. So Richard and I on the show, I said, so Richard, what's the one document? What's the one secret that you hold close to your chest that you've never talked about? And he brings up, without saying what it was, he brings up those 2 pages from the Wilson Davis document, right, on the air. And he reads part of it on the air. And he said, this document, I am convinced, is authentic. I've never talked about it on the air, but I've had it in my possession for a while. Okay, so now, fast forward 3 or 4 years, you and I bump into each other and you tell me what's going on. You had lawyered up. You introduced me to your lawyer at the time, Michael, and you were shaking your hands. You remember? And I was like, man, Grant, calm down. No, Jimmy, I have 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I get an anonymous email with some cryptic key to it. And I didn't open it. I don't open up emails that are like that. They make me nervous. And viruses or whatever, So, but like 2 weeks after that, I left the email there and I just kind of went back to it. And I went, okay, I opened it up. There was a key and there was this and that. I opened it up and it was to the files for the Wilson Davis document. So I opened them up and I'm reading them. And I called Richard Dolan immediately. Dude, I just got this thing. And he goes, man, I got it too. I go, you got it? I just opened it. I had it for 2 weeks. I said, it was weird. Grant, we both waited 2 weeks, right, to open the email. And it was like the same day, which was like a Monday night or a Tuesday night. It was earlier in the week. And I was on Coast on the weekend coming up, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll visit that in a minute. Anyway, Richard and I, for the next couple of hours on the phone, read through every page. All right. He doesn't know yet what's about to happen. And he goes, Oak Shannon. I never heard of Oak Shannon, but obviously Richard has. And he goes, man, this is getting good. And we went page by page. He goes, oh shit, church. These are the 2 pages I was talking about on the show with you. I go, what are you talking about? He said, you asked me years ago. And I said, I have these 2 pages these 2 pages are in this document. How crazy is that? And then, and I called you, and that night I called you. I said, okay, man, is this what you were talking about? And you go just like this. Everybody, this is what Grant says to me. I can either confirm or deny. I said, but did you send? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, Jimmy. And you remember that conversation too, don't you?
Yeah.
Jimmy, I don't know what you're talking about. Talk to my attorney. And your attorney told me the same thing. I don't know, man. I don't know. Everybody was so nervous about that. And to turn around, like all of the other documents that you've released, to have this go through the vetting process, and your concern from it in the beginning, and then we found out about, the chain of command and everything else, but that after that statement, that long statement from me, this all circles back, though. The contents in the Wilson Davis document, you had previous Oak Shannon notes, you had the secret UFO study group notes, Oak Shannon notes, you had stuff that tied everything else together. And all of this started because so many people wanted to say that it was just a bogus document. And you were sitting on the additional proof of this document for years, weren't you?
Well, it wasn't really years. As I recall, it was the December before when Richard was on your show, because what happened was I got the document from James Rigney, and he phoned me up, and
I'm talking about the UFO study group.
I got that 20 years ago. Yeah, I sat on for 20 years.
20 years.
And I got it from Eric Davis, and the agreement was that when Oak Shannon dies, I can release the document. And he had a heart attack at that time, about 20 years ago. And then he just kept going, and he was doing great. And then suddenly he went public, and I said, okay, game's off. Now he's public. So now I can release the notes. But the conversation with Richard was funny because he was on your show, and James Rigney, who provided me the document, contacted me. He said, did you give the document to Dolan? I go, right, no, right. I don't know. He said, well, he's talking on Jimmy Church's show. He's talking about it. He said, he is. And I said, well, maybe I did give it to him. I don't remember giving it to him. And so I went and checked, and sure. And just the fear of God went into me when I heard Richard talking, and I'm going, he is talking about the Wilson leak note. It's like, and then later on, it sort of came out, and Richard thankfully went public with it. And it sort of took out. But as you know, when it first came, there was a lot of people fighting back. A lot of people were saying, this is garbage, whatever. And I always stood by it. I knew it was real because I'd only read really the first page of the document, but I saw Oak Shannon's name, and I said, nobody is going to know Oak Shannon. Nobody's going to know that he was friends, because that was the thing. I'd gotten the Oak Shannon notes from Eric Davis, so I knew who Oak Shannon was. And then here's Eric Davis and Oak Shannon, and I'm going like, there's no chance this is coincidence that these two guys are on there. So it'll go down in a big story. But I remember what really upset me was I heard a bunch of people said, oh yeah, because they were pushing everybody. Have you seen the document? The hell put off, and all these people. Have you seen the document? And everybody was saying, well, I can't talk about it, whatever. And then some of them started to admit it. Yeah, they'd had it for 10 years. And I'm going like, what's the deal? It's like you start to wonder how many documents are in the UFO community that people have that if they released, it would all be over, that they're holding on to it for whatever reason. They're going to, blow the cover up, or they're going to make money from it. Or I don't know why people hold these documents, but there's so much secrecy inside the UFO community. And a lot of people had that Wilson leak document because it had basically come from Eric Davis checking out the story with Stephen Greer going to see the briefing with the Mitchell.
Pentagon. Yeah.
And then the document went to Bigelow, and I guess everybody on the board got a copy of the document, all the Bigelow people. So, everybody had the document, and they all just sat there. And then eventually they all started to admit, yeah, we had the document already. But it made me wonder, like, why do I have to be the guy who has to leak the document? Or the tape with Kit Green talking to the K. Randall May, the medical intuitive, about, interdimensionals and all this kind of stuff. And I had it, and it floated around for a while, and then everybody started to admit it. Yeah, they sort of knew about this, and so but it's a unique time in history where it's sort of, we had the 2017, and then that document, which sort of set off Congress to realize this is the real deal, and not only were they studying UFOs, but it was at a very high level.
Yeah, and the amount of, people that I respect too as well. Because I immediately started talking about it on Fade to Black, and I went over on Coast to Coast. I brought Greer on Coast to Coast that Friday night to talk about the document because his name was in it, and I wanted him to verify that portion of it, which he did, of course. But there was all of this pushback coming on me um, about a document that wasn't real, and people gave their reasons for it. And I will admit, even I thought it was too good. I thought it was too good. There was too much. The whole, Lockheed, we'll say it's Lockheed, the company with a flying saucer that they say can fly, and the comments from their legal team back to Wilson going, you can bitch and moan all you want, man. Yell. Go back to Washington. You're not getting anything from us. And Wilson having all the doors shut on these SAP programs and trying to get answers about it. And so it was just like it was all the good stuff, wasn't it? It was all the meat and potatoes was all in this one document, and it seemed too good to be true. So even I stayed in the middle. But more evidence started coming out, and then of course Shannon, which was mind blowing to have him come out and go public and go, and everything that was stated in the document, Shannon, about the vetting process with Wilson back to Shannon. Is this guy cool? Is this guy cool? And we'll figure out a way to put this together. Verified by Shannon. Yeah. And then of course it was brought into the public record by Congress.
Yeah. And there's another piece of background that people should know is I got this from, I was dealing with Eric Davis about the same time, 2002. He had just been released by Bigelow. Bigelow was sort of shutting down because the ranch wasn't much happening there. And so he got laid off. That's when I sort of had interaction with him. But I knew what NIDS was doing. So it was basically Bigelow had all this money. He was calling in, as you would, the top people, Kit Green, Hal Puthoff, you pick all the brains of this really smart people. And I knew they were working on all these different problems. I know, for example, one of the things that I'd never really sort of was made public is they were working on the Holloman Air Force Base film, because they were asking me about it because I was good friends with Bob Emenegger, and they were all trying to get from me. And I knew they were going to bring Charles in to interview Charles, who had actually seen the film, and then he dies in this rollover car accident 2 weeks before. And so I knew they were doing all this different stuff. Like they were checking, is the alien autopsy video. They were checking that out. They were checking out the film. They were checking out this whole story with Greer, with Wilson, and that's what they were doing. And Wilson and Eric Davis is the sharpest knife in the drawer. If you know Eric Davis, this guy is supposed to got a photographic memory. He's absolutely brilliant, and he was on the leading edge of this. So it all made sense to me. And the other point that I guess people should know is I actually got 4 documents, not the Wilson League document. I was given 4 documents. The second was the alien autopsy document, where Kit Green admitted this is actual document. This is a real document. There's nothing faked about the alien autopsy. And the other one I got that I released was a letter from Edgar Mitchell to Bob Bigelow talking about the meetings and when they're having the meetings. And the fourth one, which I've never really talked about, and nobody wanted it released because it was confidential. It was Edgar Mitchell writing a condolence letter to Lindbergh's wife when Lindbergh died. It was that. So we knew this was all coming out of the Edgar Mitchell files, because I had 4 documents from the Edgar Mitchell files. So when they told me that this guy had gotten them and taken them to Australia, and then when James Rigney went up to see him, he said, "I got these UFO documents." He looked through them. You got these documents, and he was going through these documents. And he started to photocopy them. So I knew the whole sort of backstory, which made total sense. And so I never had any doubt that the document was real. And my great fear was that I knew these guys. I mean, I knew Eric Davis, I knew, Hal Puthoff, I knew everybody was in the document, except I never talked to Shannon, but it was the old idea. And in fact, I gave them to, if you know, I called them the young guns. I actually, when they phoned me, they said, "We got this 15-page document. Is that the one you're talking about?" And I said, "We got this document." I said, "How many pages is it?" And they said, 15. I said, "Yeah, it might be the document. Sounds like it." And then apparently they got it. This Giuliano Marikovic, brilliant guy out of Europe, got it, and then they held it. And it was they had the same problem I had. It was, who's going to cut Eric Davis's throat? Who's going to be the one that releases this and puts Eric Davis in this very difficult position? So they had the document for a couple months. They didn't release it either. And there was all of those guys had that document. So, and I can see their thing, but for it's a very difficult situation. If you're part of the game and you play with these games, are you going to turn these guys in? If, for example, you've interviewed this guy numerous times and then suddenly this document's in your lap, are you going to expose the guy?
You've been at this for a very, very, very long time, going back to your first close encounter in Canada back in the early 70s.
Yeah.
The position, because you have seen the ebb and flow, the mountains and the valleys of this UFO community over the decades. You've been through each thing as it has unfolded, whether it's MJ-12 or when Roswell first surfaced, right? And going through the alien autopsy film in the mid 90s, Project Serpo, whatever you want to do, just all of these things that we have gone through. Did you ever see an atmosphere coming like we have today with the subject, or are we in the middle of another hill and valley, another mountain and valley situation? What do you think?
Well, I wrote an article in 2009 called "The 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth," and I went through all this stuff. And Stephen Greer talked about, if they actually this gets announced, oil will be worth nothing. The stock market's going to melt down, and people are going to jump off bridges. There was all these different things, and so we put this sort of stuff out. The thing that surprised me, it was more the fact that it started in 75. Actually, next month will be 50 years, and I actually gave a sort of a small lecture to the town where this thing happened a couple nights ago. They're having a 50th anniversary of this event, but it was like for many years we worked. There was not like it is today with instant communication, with we can do interviews and you can do one interview after another and stuff like that. It was done by snail mail. It'd take months to get any sort of thing confirmed, and we were going through all this kind of stuff, and it was still newsletters that you had to buy and monthly and stuff like that. And it was basically like spinning your tires till 2017. And 2017, I was absolutely shocked. I never in my life would have believed that there would actually be an admission that the government had actually investigated UFOs. And that changed everything. I remember there was always this joke inside the UFO community that, it was just a bunch of old people that were studying UFOs. That was usually true. If you went to UFO Congress, the big one, you'd see 1,500 people in the room and there'd be no African Americans and no young people. And then I remember the one guy who was running a conference and the woman came up and said, "Is there a senior discount?" He said, "A senior discount? If there's a senior discount, everybody get in for a discount." And that was the thing. So we were just spinning our tires. I could not believe in 2017 when this sort of took off. And then as it's moved along, it's just accelerated. I still have my doubts that they're going to get to the bottom level of the security, because that's what I think is going on. That I think what you got to do is you got to change the law. There's so much security. It's built on fear, on top of fear, on top of fear. And you have all these levels of security, and less and less and less and less people know. And that's the way the whole system was built. So I'm very doubtful that you're going to be able to get the bottom line of this thing unraveled. And then recently I've started talking about, we had the highest level source that anybody ever had. And that was Dr. Eric Walker, who was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. That's where DARPA came from. That's where Jason's came from. Very, very powerful guy, president of Penn State University, 15 years, 14 honorary doctorate degrees. And we interviewed him, a bunch of people. I was sort of the ringleader, and there was a bunch of people interviewing him. And we put it all together in a book back in 1990. But anyway, I started looking back at what he had said, and we thought he was talking in rhymes and riddles. And now you look at it and you go like, wow, this guy was actually telling us the truth. And he said a couple of things that I sort of bring out when people talk about disclosure now. He said a couple of things. He said, why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? And you look at it as basically curiosity. You have most people just want to know, like, where they're from, what's going on, all this sort of stuff. And he's basically in the military industrial world, where we really don't care about your curiosity, or as Bush told Carter, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. That was one of the questions that he had. And the other one was even more important. And that I sort of warned people about disclosure. Be careful what you wish for, because if you get disclosure, he said to us, he said, okay, so if you figure it out, what are you going to do with it? And this is the whole deal. So people are talking about, we're going to get the crafts back, eminent domain. What are you going to do with the crafts? You're going to park them on the White House lawn? Like what are you going to do? Or are you in the state of affairs today? Do you actually seriously believe that they're going to allow grays, reptilians, and mantids to walk the streets of America, or build factories where they can create a car with no engine, no fuel, nothing, for like $1,000? Because they don't make any money. They all work on board ship. They don't make any money. And you have these complex issues that nobody's really considering, that if this thing does unravel, there's 1,000 new problems that are going to arise.
Those are about 5 or 6 great points right in a row. But going back to the original question, so disclosure happens, what are you going to do with it? That's deep. That's deep. Yeah. That's a non-trivial question. Okay. What do you do with it? And I think most want to dance in the streets. That's what they would do with it.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Oh, finally. Okay. I don't have to be embarrassed about this. I can talk about it.
But then the next day you got to go back to work again. It's like the Super Bowl. My team won the Super Bowl. Okay, so It's changed. Nothing. Go back to work. And if you're in the military industrial complex and you realize from 1950 on that there's a mental phenomena involved in this phenomena, and you're trying to back engineer this stuff and figure this stuff out, and realize, as the people I had in the UFO Sky Pilot book told me, you can go from one point and the other point to the universe, anywhere in the universe, instantaneously. And they're looking at this sort of stuff, and the alien's telepathic and it's talking in your head and stuff like that. And you just realize the potential technology is involved. And that's why they just basically say, we don't care if you're curious. Who cares? Why should we? Or Walker said to us at one point, he said, why should we? No, he said, it's been 40 years. This is a 1987 interview. It's been 40 years. Nobody's blown up the world yet. What are you getting so excited about? And the other one he said that was interesting. I heard from this last Soul conference. Nicole, I'm good friends with Nicole. She was there, and she was sitting beside somebody pretty prominent in the field, and they were talking about the crash in Arizona. Kingman, Arizona. And they were saying, the bodies and stuff. And this person was beside Nicole and said, that's not true. That's not true. There was no bodies. They walked away. And then I'm thinking, they walked away. That's what Walker told us. We were talking about the bodies. What about the bodies and stuff? He says, well, I can tell you, I don't have any bodies in my room. And he said, you're assuming a lot of stuff, and most of what you assume is wrong. How do you know they died? How do you know they didn't get up and walk away? So when I heard this from Soul Conference, I said, Nicole, he said that? And I go, yeah. And I said, that's the Kingman crash.
Well, what about Leonard Stringfield's account of that with the autopsy tent and and the multiple bodies, and they were there for a couple of weeks with everything on ice? What about that?
Well, I don't. I'm not sure. I mean, didn't even follow the Kingman crash until I heard this thing. But that's what Walker. That's what we're saying. Like a lot of the stuff that Walker said didn't make any sense. For example, the other thing he said to us: "Hey, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP?" And then the guy said, well, I don't really know. And he said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Well, I didn't understand that till 2012. And I suddenly got this download thing. And that's what Walker was talking about. And he was talking, but the time wasn't right for us to understand what he was actually saying. We thought he was just playing games with us. And he was actually indirectly telling us what was actually going on. And now I look back and I go, this is stunning that they've been on top of this. They've known about this. Like the ESP thing is the same as the Canadians in 1950 said, we were told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. They're not doing very well. So that sort of indicates that in Roswell, they may have had a live alien. And that we got it wrong with the MJ-12 document. We thought there was 4 dead aliens. And then, of course, later on, after the Roswell people started doing the interviews, they had about a dozen people say, no, one was alive. And then this story about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where the alien is talking in people's heads and stuff like that. And that's where the Americans knew to tell the Canadians in 1950 there was a mental phenomena associated, because otherwise how would you know? Because Adamski didn't come forward until a couple of days after the detonation of the first hydrogen bomb in 52. So nobody was talking to aliens, and yet the Canadians had been told that mental phenomena was part of this mystery.
I drove through Kingman twice last week. And first off, okay, we'll move on. We've got a lot to cover, but it's this big. Okay. It's surrounded by, I mean, there's a, I think they might have a Pizza Hut and a McDonald's and stuff. So it's it's semi-civilized, but it is surrounded by 100 miles of desert. In all directions, and you can't help but when you drive through Kingman, just thinking about the possibility of that crash and the U.S. Army showing up and flatbeds and everything else that they had to do. So Kingman is a very special place. I've never been to the crash site. I've never stopped and checked it out, but I actually drove through it twice.
They actually become like sacred sites. I know the one that the famous one in Canada is the Falcon Lake story, and I actually gave a piece of the rock to this town, this Carmen, where we had all the sightings, what got me started. And it's been less than 100 people at the site of the Falcon Lake landing. This is where the guy lands, thing lands, and he looks inside and he hears these people talking or whatever, and then the thing burns him as it's taking off and stuff like that. It was a big case, and Mayo Clinic looked at him, and we have the records and all that kind of stuff. But when we went there on it with a film crew, you have to go in by horseback into this site, and we're standing on the rock, and they're doing this interview with the cameras and stuff, and this tour guide is explaining, and there's nobody been at this site and stuff like that. And I'm looking at the rock, and I'm going, holy, it's all fracturing the top of the rock. So me and Desta, my assistant, we start filling our pockets full of rocks. So we actually hand these out for souvenirs. He said, the UFO may actually have been, his foot may have been right on top of this piece of rock. And I still got a few of them left, but it becomes sacred sites where, you go there and you sort of go back to what actually happened. And they showed us where the guy was sitting when the UFO came down and how he walked over and all this kind of stuff. It was just fascinating.
Yeah, Giant Rock does that to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the history and everything that went on in, under, and around that rock for so many years. And if we look at, like a case like Joshua Tree, it's Landers technically, that's almost like the first it's like the first contact experience, and Van Tassel, the way he describes it and the way it went down in 1951, you have Roswell, but no, there wasn't a contact experience. Van Tassel walks outside and there's a guy standing there next to the flying saucer, next to the runway, for the little makeshift airport that he had there. And to hear him talk about everything, and he took a ride on the spaceship. And to stand there at Giant Rock, knowing about these stories and contact experiences, the original contact in the desert, by the way, that's what they had out there. They had a UFO conference with 10,000 people, 15,000 people every year until the early 70s.
Yeah.
It has become a sacred site. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
Now, staying on this point, though, when you look at the Wilson Davis document and the statements from Rear Admiral Wilson in the document about coming out to California and being told what he was told at a corporation out here, we all assume it's Skunk Works, about them having a craft and backwards engineering it. And they said that they think it can fly, but they don't know how to fly it. And then we have the testimony from David Grush, under oath. Are we in possession of a flying saucer or multiples? And are they in Canada?
Well, that's one of the things I point out is why are all the whistleblowers in the United States of America? That's one of the things where you basically have, this is a single thing. And then you start to wonder, is the government got something to do with that? Like these latest whistleblowers, every time I see a new whistleblower coming out, I'm thinking to myself, why is this guy not in jail? Like, how do you, it's like if I had a nuclear weapon, I'm working on a nuclear weapon. I want everybody to know there's a new nuclear weapon. So I'm going to be a whistleblower and I'm going to come out. It's the most highly classified secret in the United States. And I keep thinking, like, are they letting these guys out? Like this latest one with the psionics, which is basically from my book, my whole book about the flying the craft and the mental aspect of the whole thing. They changed the name, and then it's like they say they go to Dopser, and this was allowed. So I mean, why did they take so long to announce that they were trying to bring these crafts in and then shoot them down? That's got to be classified. How do you release that? Where so it goes through Dopser, and it's almost like they're being allowed to release this. Or if you look at James Lakatsky, who ran the OSAP program, where he goes on an interview and he says, Colm Kelleher and I are experts at taking highly classified material and moving it down to lower classifications. And I'm going, that's exactly what we're talking about. They're taking this highly classified material and they're bringing it out and they're putting it in books. So you remember the interview, and this is a sort of a new development with this craft you're talking about at Lockheed. He says in the interview, he said, we had a meeting in a congressional facility in 2011, which means people say, no, they're not briefing the Congress. It's all lies. They're bypassing. Well, if it was in a congressional facility, then somebody in Congress, and he said there was a senator there, which is now been confirmed to be Reid. And he said, we announced to them, it was a long meeting, went for the whole day. And he said, I can't tell you right now what happened in the rest of the meeting, but I can tell you, and you have to read what's in the book, exactly what I said and how it's worded. We have a craft and we managed to get into it. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, this matches a story that Jack Sarfati is now telling. Jack Sarfati says he's got a Navy guy who ran this program for 4 years and actually managed to fly the craft. And he says what I pointed out in the book was the craft is alive, the craft is conscious, but he adds something else. He said that the craft has its own personality, and the craft will not allow you in the craft unless you are you have the right set of the right mindset. Like you'll hear the whistleblowers talking about this mindset of love and oneness and all this kind of stuff like that. And he said that the Lockheed craft that they had, they couldn't get in it. So when Lakatsky said we managed to get in it in 2011, so that means they had this craft for who knows how many decades and they couldn't get in it because the craft wouldn't let them in. And that's
now,
a whole new.
Didn't Lakatsky imply? I have the book.
Yeah,
I did. I didn't he imply that it was him that went inside the craft?
I don't remember that. I remember that they'd gotten in the craft.
Right.
Maybe he'd gotten in it, but that's when they asked him. They said, "What's inside the craft?" And then he said, they sort of interrupted him, but he said, "If you knew that, you'd realize that the whole rest of the book is totally primitive." And this, so he said, maybe the next book will include that. So he says, I've got to take it to Dopser because they said, what about the inside of the craft? He said, I can't answer that. I have to put it through Dopser. It's almost like they're going to put it through Dopser. Dopser's going to say, okay, now you can release it, and they put it out. Same as the whole thing where he said, we have determined, this is after my book came out about the UFO flying the craft with the mind. He said, we have now determined that the UFO propulsion is part psychic and part physical. And that's exactly what I said. It's a physical craft. It's alive. It's conscious, whatever you think. And then you use the mind to fly the craft. So you can see this idea that definitely Lakatsky is dropping stuff. He's releasing this kind of stuff. And then the latest part of it, that this idea was that Lockheed couldn't get the craft to work. And the latest story people start asking me about, and it makes sense, is that, I don't know if you know the story about James Ryder. So James Ryder was a senior vice president at Lockheed. And if you go on the internet and you check he has 2 lectures, 2 1-hour lectures. You listen to these lectures. They're like UFO lectures. These in quantum physics.
Yeah, I know they are.
Time and space and stuff like that. And supposedly he's the guy. He said, I'm friends with Hal Puthoff, been good friends with Hal Puthoff. I'm friends with Russell Targ. And then the story is that that Lockheed had the craft, and Bigelow went to them, and they couldn't get rid of they couldn't get the craft to work, and they couldn't get anywhere with it, and they wanted to get it off their hands because it was costing Lockheed a lot of money to store this thing and all the security and stuff. So they said, if you get permission from the Air Force and CIA, then you can have the craft. And of course the Air Force said, well, not only can you not release it, they've referred to this memo in the 50s, you got to keep it indefinitely under lock and key until the time is right. And then it reflected back to an interview. You did the original interview. I don't know if it was in your interview, but Tom DeLonge did 2 major interviews.
You're talking about the one he did on the
He
show.
did one with you, and he did one with Knapp, and I don't remember which one it was in. But he says we're in the room, we're in there, and Weiss hadn't come into the room yet. The head scientist and somebody else was in the room, and he said the one guy says to me, he says, "Hey." He says, I'm not, all I want to know is how does it work? How does this propulsion system work?
That was on Fade to Black.
Okay. And so he was hanging around with Greer. So of course he said, "Oh, I think consciousness is involved." And then this guy says, "Now you're talking." And according to Tom DeLonge, he said, that's all the guy wanted to talk about for 45 minutes was consciousness. If you watch James Ryder's interviews, James Ryder was the guy. There's almost no doubt James Ryder was the guy that was in that room with him. And because it was this consciousness thing, and they couldn't back. But when you start hearing these stories with the psionics, it makes it sound like, no, they've captured the thing. I'm sort of up in the air. I still think they haven't, because I listen quite well to Jim Semivan. And Jim Semivan has got an offer. He says, "I will bet you 1 year of my pension salary that they haven't gotten anywhere, that they have bodies and crafts, but that doesn't mean you know what's going on."
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And here's okay, I'm going to share this with you. This is crazy. Skunk Works is 1 mile from my house, right? It's right there to the east. And I drive by it. I love driving by it, actually, maybe a few times a week, right? Okay. And that's in my car, but also on my Harley. That's one of my, and it's right there. Yeah. It's so close. And, but I always look, always check it out. And they have 3 or 4 hangar-sized production buildings, ginormous, ridiculously big. There's 4 of them, a bunch of administration buildings and things and stuff. But the big buildings are fascinating. You just wonder what's going on in there. And they all have massive hangar doors, big. I mean, like it's ginormous, but they're always closed, Grant. Okay. About 2 years ago, I'm driving, and I always look at the buildings. I made the right-hand turn. I'm heading up, and the friggin' hangar door is open. Yeah.
Wow.
And the one facing the street, and it's not fully open. It's segmented like this.
Yeah.
And the 2 center parts are open. Maybe, well, it's so big. It's probably 20 feet wide on a building that's 500 feet wide, right? So it's like this black sliver, but it's open. I've never seen it open. It was only one time, by the way.
Wow.
So what do? I make a U-turn, and I come back, and I pulled into the bike lane right there and parked my car. And I got straight out, and I'm looking right in, and I take out my cell phone. Oh, man, I should even say this on the air. I should even say it. Okay. Anyway, I could see in. I couldn't see anything, but I was at a really what if moment, right? What if I got a glimpse? And I had to. And now I've had this house for 4 years. I've only seen that door crack that one time.
Oh.
And after Wilson Davis and everything else that's been said, and the things that I've seen in the skies around here, I've got to scratch my head and go, could they? Could that be going on right down the street? I suspect, I want to ask you this because you're involved in this. After Grush's testimony and his statement that I'll give you the addresses, right? All right. I'll give you all that. We'll go into a skip and I'll tell you where this stuff is. Is that showing our hand? Well, right. So, you know, anybody like Lockheed, they're going to move that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going to leave it there, would they? And the conversation that was going around was that we have moved this stuff to places outside of the United States. And the first one that was brought up, you know, all of the Five Eyes, and that some of the stuff went up to Canada. Did you hear?
No, I heard the one about the South Pacific, on an island in the South Pacific. I heard that one.
Right. But you didn't hear anything about Canada.
No. But again, what we're doing here, this part of disclosure, is just simply do they have bodies and crafts? And it's like people always give me this thing about, oh, there's going to be catastrophic disclosure. I said, what do you mean? What can possibly be catastrophic disclosure? Oh, they got bodies and crafts. Well, everybody's got, I guarantee you it's like 2017. They raised the consciousness to 2017. And as soon as they said, oh, the government is investigating UFOs, everybody went, yeah, we knew that already. And that's what's going to happen if they say bodies and crafts. Everybody's going to go, yeah, I knew that already. And even if now the psionics thing, they've leaked the psionics thing that they're actually in contact with these crafts. Everybody's going to go, we knew that already. And so what could be possibly catastrophic?
Okay. Grant, I love you so much. You bring up the right stuff at the right time. Psionics is a new word. I mean, it's a fashionable word now, right? But we've been talking about this aspect of the UFO phenomenon and ET in contact for decades. Yeah. It isn't new, is it?
Yeah, well, that's what they've done all along. People don't realize the word UFO was only invented by Ruppelt in 1952. They used to call them flying saucers and flying discs, but that implied what was going on. So they changed the word to UFO. And then when Hillary Clinton was running for election, she was going to do the big disclosure thing. They had the 7-year plan where they were going to unravel this thing, like in the Schumer Amendment, same deal. And she said, there's a new nomenclature. It's called UAPs. And so that's what they're doing. And they change it to more like a sort of a more scientific type of word. And everybody goes, oh yeah, I don't believe in Greer's CE5. That's all nonsense. But psionics, that's cool. And it's the same thing. It's like nothing, especially if you see their film and you go like, when these little tiny lights in the sky and you go like, come on, man, Stephen Greer could do better than that. It's like, it's all played up, but it's a scientific word. And that's the whole thing is what you do if you're the government is you want to get out in front of the story. You want to lead the story rather than being in behind and trying to, put a news guy, answer questions all the time. You want to lead. And if you go back to Chase Brandon, I don't know if you interviewed Chase Brandon, but Chase Brandon talked about that. He was the Hollywood guy. And he said every time they were doing a movie and there was a CIA thing in the movie, he'd go to the guy and he'd say, hey, Jimmy, you're making a movie and it's got CIA in it. Yeah. Hey, Jimmy, you ever been to the CIA? No. You like to go to the CIA? I can take you around. You can get a better idea of what it looks like. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to lead the guy, almost like a panhandler. You walk beside the guy and you talk to him, and then you make your pitch. And that's what I think they're doing. So the technology thing, it's up in the air. I'm more open now to the fact that they may have back engineer stuff. The one thing you should ask, because you're having a conversation with Chris Bledsoe. And Chris Bledsoe, this has to do with what Tim Taylor told me. Tim Taylor indicated to me quite strongly by what he showed me that they may have time travel. And Chris Bledsoe, Ryan, I've never heard Chris say it, but Ryan said that Tim Taylor told him categorically that we had time travel, that we'd locked that.
Yeah, Ryan told me the same thing.
Yeah, so that's what if you're talking to Chris, if you get it from Chris to confirm it, that's what I look at. For years I've looked at, and every time I looked at the anti-gravity thing, it always seemed to run into a brick wall. Then nothing happened. Every time I looked at the portal thing, whether it was Ron Pandolfi's statements or whatever it was, it always seemed to be something that made sense, that they may have had this kind of stuff. And when I got it from Tim Taylor, he was showing me these photographs, but then it was like 2 years later, I suddenly went, hey, like Tim Taylor showed me his photographs. What was he doing at Lockheed? What was he doing at Hughes Aircraft, the old Hughes Aircraft building outside of LAX? What was he doing there? He must have believed there was some truth to this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to LA and looked at this building and taken these photographs of all these paintings inside the building. So the time travel thing, I think there may be some truth to that. And now you start seeing where they're talking about the technology, but I definitely don't think that they have super end technology, because I always refer to the fact that you lost a war against a bunch of guys on camels and donkeys, and so even if you have the technology, you can't really release it. And that's what happened with Lockheed when Jimmy Carter was rerunning for president. He leaked the fact that they had the stealth fighter. And there was a guy that lectured at a UFO conference, and he talked about how angry everybody was at Lockheed, that now they had to move the stuff because the satellites were coming over, and they had to get the stuff out of the building and move it, knowing that the Russians were now going. So that's part of the thing, is that anything you expose, if you're a good intelligence agent in the Soviet Union or China, you're going to put the pieces together and you're going to go from there, and you know who to tap, you know whose phone to go after, all this kind of stuff. And that's why there's this extreme secrecy, that if you haven't got it figured out, you're not going, and anything that you leak can be used by the other side, no matter how insignificant you think it is.
Yeah, that's what happened to me when I got hassled by the authorities out near Edwards Air Force Base. And I was goofing around. I was doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing. I admit that. taking pictures and stuff. And at the dry lake bed at the end of their runway, where Chuck Yeager, landed on the dry lake bed to break the sound barrier, right? And I mean, it's Edwards. It's a very historical place, and I'm just out there on my Harley taking pictures, and man, it happened. Security rolled up on me from behind me too, from the desert side, and I was alone. But anyway, I was trying to make light of the, hey man, what's going on? I'm just out here for them aliens or whatever. And these dudes were not playing, man.
Yeah.
Not playing. And they were watching me from the hilltop, taking pictures and selfies and stuff. I think about it now. They should have arrested me. But anyway, you know what they said to me?
What?
You're going to post this stuff and our adversaries will get something from those photographs.
Yeah,
that's what you're doing. You're giving away secret. And man, and they were right. They were 100% right. They were not wrong in that. And they do not play around. And here's the other thing, Grant. And I invite anybody to come out here to Palmdale. Don't come out to see me. You're not going to talk to me. But come out to Palmdale. Drive around. Go to Skunk Works, go to Northrop Grumman, drive past Air Force Plant 42, which is that's allegedly where the bodies are buried. And NASA's out here, of course, Edwards Air Force Base, and drive around and look at what is here. It is dozens of miles in each direction of high security, fenced off, advanced aerospace building testing programs. It's everywhere, and it's fun. But the other part is this is real life. It's not a joke. There's tens of thousands of people out here that are working on these programs. They all have secret clearances. And if you are going to do stuff like this in a research capacity and reverse engineer, this is where you're going to do it. This is where all the specialists are. And it's a secure area. Miles upon miles upon miles.
That's what always makes me wonder when these guys come forward, that in order to get that kind of high security clearance, you got to be trustworthy. And suddenly this guy's popping up and he's going to tell the story, or they come to me. Like I got a phone call at one time. U.S. intelligence said we should talk to you. And I said, do you realize I'm a Canadian? Like, are you kidding me? Like, what the hell would the U.S. intelligence say to talk to me for? And they wanted to sort of control the story. But I always have my suspicion that there's no way people can be walking around telling this stuff, that they basically they're sort of leaking this stuff no matter what anybody says. And Tom DeLonge is the prime example of that. They would take some rock star into this skiff and then set him up with a bunch of intelligence guys and send him to NASA and send him to the ONI and all these different people. He set up the first one, but after that they gave him all these people to talk to, and that definitely indicates they wanted him to carry some sort of message, and they just want to control the message. So I firmly still believe that they are indirectly, gradually leaking this story out.
If you ever leave the prison planet that is Canada right now, and you come down to the United States, and you need to just come over, stay at my house, one of my guest rooms, stay here, and just hang out with me, and I'll take you around. I just did this with James Fox, man. It was so much fun. Anyway, I'll take you around. But you know what's fascinating is just go to the supermarket. At the supermarket, everybody there with a shopping cart, putting their eggs and milk and Captain Crunch, right? Pushing this cart through. Everybody in there has got a top secret clearance. Everybody. I tell the story, but it's really funny. I was not too long ago, and I'm in like the frozen foods, buying whatever. And there was a lady standing next to me, and she had on a B-21 Project t-shirt.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't announce that until a year ago, 6 months. They had the press conference where they announced the second generation of the stealth bomber, right?
Yeah.
And showed it right down the street. It was crazy. Dude, over my house, they did a B-1 bomber and a B-52 flyby with colored smoke, right? Flew up the big, right? It was crazy. Anyway, before that, lady had a B-21 project team, right? With all these insignias on it. And I'm thinking, what does she know?
Yeah.
What, and you can't strike up a conversation. You're going to get shut down, like you're saying.
Yeah.
It does make me wonder, does Hal Puthoff know the secrets? Well, we know Hal's name, don't we? So he probably doesn't.
Well, there's
You
the
know what I
rumor
mean?
story. There's a rumor story about Hal. He was asked, could you name the 12 guys that are running it? Yeah, probably. Well, why don't you release it? Because you'd go to the New York Times, they'd write an article, I'd have to deny it, and then everybody would stop talking to me, which is the other problem.
That's exactly it, right?
Exactly.
So if you know their names, right, if they're in public, they probably don't know. They may know the next level, right? But them themselves, I'm saying probably not, right?
Yeah, it's a need to know thing where, some people, but Hal would be the top person, I think, he's been in it. Him and Kit Green have top secret SCI clearances since probably 1969, 1970.
Now, what about how many, we've got to take a break and we'll do it in a second. You can just throw a number out. How many countries do you think have a craft? It can't be an exclusive to the United States. So I'm thinking Russia and China for sure.
Well, Bigelow was asked the question, and he said Russia, China, South America, and that's when he said, I think they're seeding them. I think, and that's this idea that Tim Taylor brought up as well, the gifting thing, that they're gifting these things around. The thing is how much Americans control, because the Virginia one, the rumor story was they walked in and grabbed all that. So they had the craft, but it actually ended back in the United States. And they could put a lot of pressure on a country, with military funds and stuff like that, withdrawing funds.
I've heard Iraq, we retrieved a craft from there, one from Afghanistan, one from Iran. So I mean,
my dad told the story. My dad was a pilot for the Canadian government. He was a accident investigation guys was in his office, and they had a craft in 1959 that something crashed on the Manitoba Saskatchewan border. My father told me the story that the guy went up there, and he said he got to the site and the Americans were already there. And they were all surrounded. And he said, well, I'm here. I'm from the Canadian government. We're investigating this crash. I'm the inspector. And he said, sir, please leave. And he said, what do you mean? This is Canadian property. And he went to this whole thing, and the guy stuck the gun in his stomach and says, sir, I'd advise you to turn around and leave right now. And he went and he got on a phone. This is 1959. He got on a phone to Ottawa. And he said to Ottawa, he said, what's going on? He said, there's a crash here, and we need to know what's going on here. And the guy said, hang on, we'll phone you back in 30 minutes. They phoned him back in 30 minutes and said, you should probably just let the Americans do what they want to do. And my father said for the rest of his life, the guy in the office would say, the damn Americans, they think they own everything. And they thought it was a U-2 that had crashed, but the damn Americans, they think they own everything.
One of the Space Force security guys.
Yeah.
I asked him. Oh, he was asking me. He's like, so man, so this is what you do? Yeah. Radio and TV. And I talk about this stuff. I said, how about you? And he goes, how about me? What?
Yeah.
What do you know? He goes, what, like flying saucers? And I go, yeah. And he goes, look, and I swear, Grant, I am quoting him. This is a quote as direct as I can make it. This is exactly what he said. He goes, we hear the same rumors that you guys do, that we have flying saucers at Edwards Air Force Base. And all of us on base talk about it.
Yeah.
His words, man, came right out of his mouth. He goes, have I seen a flying saucer on Edwards? No, I haven't. Am I looking? Yeah, I would love to see one, but I haven't seen one. And we're all talking about it. And we read the same news that you do. And that's almost verbatim what he had said to me. Yeah,
That's a compartmentalization thing. I always tell people,
for sure.
If you think everybody in the government knows what's going on, just take my example. I was a facility manager at the University of Manitoba. I had the keys to the president's office, 8 vice president's offices, human resources, payroll. And do you think if I knew what was going on at the university, I would have left 6 months before a major buyout? There's no way. I was waiting for the buyout and they said, no, they're not coming. And that's the thing. You know your little job and that's all you know. And that's the way the game is played. And so to think that people are in the government were going to know what's going on, there's so few people, if this is true, that know exactly what's going on. Walker actually said they are an elite group. If you were a part of that group, I would know. And then he was asked, are there more than 12? He said, yes. Are they international? He said, yes. But other than that, that's all he told us.
James Fox and I are standing with his sister and his camera and audio crew, right? We're filming.
Yeah.
And we are outside. No, what technically at this time, man, I'm saying way too much. Okay. No, we're not filming. Take that out. We're not filming.
Okay.
But we're all standing together. And I'm talking to I'm mic'd up. Okay. And Fox is at another location listening to me. They might be filming me from afar. Okay. All right, man, I'm saying too much. I'm going to swear to God, I'm going to get in trouble. James, I apologize. But I'm talking to this security guy and we're outside of the gates for Air Force Plant 42. We're standing at the signs, the giant signs that say no photography, no this, no that,
Yeah.
Penalty of death, base commander, all that stuff. Yeah. And there's like the billboard side and they're right. That's where we are. And I'm watching cars pull and go through the security gates and drive on to the compound. But there's no parking lot. Right. And I'm just kind of, so I turn to the security guy. I go, how many people work here? He's like, I don't know. I go, well, I'm standing here watching these cars pull through the gates and then head up the road. Where are all the cars? He goes, I don't know. I go, do they park? I swear to God. Do they park underground? I don't know. I go, well, I don't see any car. I see, where do they park? I don't know. Okay. All right. It was so fun. I got zero information out of that guy. And you're looking at these, they're huge, these production buildings. Yeah. They're building big things in there. Aircraft production, or whatever it is, and development. And there's all kinds of these factories back on the compound. And Air Force Plant 42. You can look it up. You can Google it. You can see it. Tell me where those cars park. There's a lot of people in those buildings aren't big and they're empty. You know what I mean? They're, you could, why the security gate with all these cars go? And yeah. And the guy was really, really being a bit of a dick. Like, dude, don't ask me about underground parking. Don't ask me about how many people work here. Don't, I don't know. I said, man, you're here at the gate all day long. You can tell me something, And then, okay. So back to Grush. Before Grush gave his testimony, and I asked this security guy about this, is why I'm bringing it up. Before Grush's testimony, I was watching these flights coming out of Skunk Works, these big transport planes, big, huge, right? Turning and going over to Edwards and landing, right? And it was like for a good solid 6 months. And I was shooting video and showing it to friends going, man, they're moving a lot of stuff. After Grush's testimony, it stopped. The reason why this is my personal opinion, they knew he was about to speak.
Yeah.
So they started the shell game then. After he spoke, they had already moved everything that the shell game. They had already started that. So I asked the security guy, I go, man, about a year ago, Grant, you're going to love this. About a year ago, were all these giant jet transports taking off out of here, 2 or 3 at a time. And they would just turn and land at Edwards. He goes, so? I go, yeah, man, but it was going on all day and all night. And now it just stopped. Yeah? Well, what were they doing? And he goes, man, it's simple. I go, okay. They come in here for repairs. And then they fly over to Edwards for the testing of the repairs. I was like, man, that's a bunch of bullshit. They fly here for repairs, not to an Air Force base. Right. They fly to Skunk Works. Right. But that's what he said. Yeah. That's what, and he stuck to it. So, and I didn't want to push the issue. Everybody knows who I am in this town and everything else. I just don't want to get in trouble. And there's a lot of private things that happen here that I see that I don't talk about on the air because it's just uncool. Yeah, it's uncool. Yeah, and
you can see their point, what they're getting at. I mean, in terms of it's the idea. It's built on this fear that, anything, you got to cover every little base, cover this up, cover that up, and seal everything up. And it's gotten so sealed up that nobody can get at it. I mean, even the people that are supposed to be cannot make their way through the labyrinth of different levels of secrecy, locks and stuff like that. And it's the way it's been built, but it's all based on fear.
Right. I had to give you an example, now that this is like out in the public, okay. I saw, it was about 2 years ago, I saw some test flights of a crazy aircraft, and it was black, doing some pretty crazy stuff, fast, loud, cool, amazing. But when I looked at it through the binoculars, I'd never seen anything like this before. And I know my aircraft, but I didn't say anything. I made a couple of phone calls. Well, this was nuts, but I never took any pictures or video because a lot of this stuff happens very quick, and it's not like you have a chance to go and shoot. So you're not prepared to shoot it. Anyway, it was announced, a couple of weeks ago, the new F-47 Generation 6 fighter jet, and the description of the craft. And I've been watching that thing out here for a while now. And so those are the kind of things that you see in the sky, and it's fun. And if you're an enthusiast of the subject, UFOs or just aircraft, it's a lot of fun. They, what they do out here. I would love for you to be here when this goes down. Again, it's not really that private, but it's not, or secret, but it's also not for public consumption. But rumors start out here in the aviation world, the popular mechanics or, these aircraft groups and photographers and things about something that's going to go down. And this is what they do out here. It's crazy. This is my neighborhood. The friggin' highway patrol comes out here and starts closing all the roads down. Okay. On the perimeter, on the other side of the police lines, are these pickup trucks of photographers with these friggin' lenses, right? And tripods, and they're all on the roofs of stuff and RV and shooting because something is about to do maybe runway testing, right? Something's going to fly. And they're all there, man. And they're all on the perimeter, and they're all trying to get the shot, but they block the streets off, going out. And so everybody's there, man. It's crazy. You'll be driving and you'll come up to a corner and you'll see an intersection of a street. It's all desert. And you'll see like 20 pickup trucks, all nestled, all trying to get in between the buildings, with these massive, and that's where I live. Yeah, it's crazy, man.
And the Russians as well there with the Chinese.
Oh man, there are so many canopies out here, right? Where
Yeah.
they park aircraft, and you can see how they move them. They know where the Chinese and Russian satellites are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And what time of day that they're going over, and they move stuff, and then they park it under. Man, I'm giving away all the secrets,
Yeah.
but I love it, man. You see it all over the place. These giant canopies, like a canopy for your picnic table,
Yeah.
but the size of a football field. Yeah. There's at least. I'll take you out there. I can show you 12, at least a dozen right there. Lord knows what's inside, but from what you can see as you go by, you can see probably a dozen.
And the other thing I think people have to remember is these people have been doing this since World War II. They've been doing this for 80 years. They know what they're doing. So the idea that somebody's just going to slip out and start to reveal secrets, I always go like, nah, it doesn't make any sense to me that they have so much. Like, even I think Eric Davis mentioned the fact that for every program, for every dollar you spend, there's $10 spent in security on the program. And so I say to people, like, what are they spending with the UFO secrecy? What are they spending the secrecy money on? And then you got to look at counterintelligence stories, distractions, all this kind of stuff that people sort of pretend that there's no security around these programs. You got to realize these guys know what they're doing. They've been doing this forever. Whether it's intelligence or military or whatever, they know exactly what they're doing. And so it's pretty hard to get stuff out of there. And anyway.
Yeah. And when the news came out about Area 51, not only Bob Lazar, but Independence Day, and how that happened, and the authorization for them to say that in a Hollywood movie. But anyway, Edwards Air Force Base was built for the same reasons. When they built that base, it was originally called Muroc Army Airfield.
Yeah.
And then they changed the name to Edwards, I think 54. But back then, I say I live in the Mojave Desert, and I do. But back then, there was nothing out here. This is remote, and way outside of LA. And so all of the approaches, and it's still the same way. There's only 2 or 3 roads outside of Palmdale that go to these areas, and they're there, man. The patrols are there. Yeah. You can see them from the street, and it's so remote. And there's this one mountaintop. It's called, of all things, Rocket Site Road. Look it up. Look it up on Google.
Yeah.
Okay. You go to Rocket Site Road, which is aptly named because they have like 5 launch pads, big, on the top of this mountain. And dude, it's so cool to see, by the way. If you're a guy and you're into this stuff, it's pretty cool. But when you turn around, you drive to the end and then turn around and then come back, and you roll off of the mountain and point down the hill, you can see Edwards. Wow. And you can see what's going on. It is surrounded by, I don't know, 50 square miles of dry lake bed. Edwards sits in the middle of it. You can't get to Edwards. You have to go across. If you're going to jump a fence or try to get to it, you've got to go across a dry lake bed that goes on for miles, and that's how protected it is. You can kind of drive by and look at it, but it is a secret base, period. And it was built for that reason. Testing and training of advanced aerospace. Yeah. So, all right, let's take our break. Grant, you stay right there.
Okay.
Tonight, it is UFOs and UAPs and government secrets with Grant Cameron. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back after this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice,
That's
right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Grant Cameron is with us. Great conversation. And I just want to keep this moving. This is the thing. And Grant's listening to me right now. One of the things that I enjoy probably the most about this show is I'm here to learn. And I need to get stuff out of Grant's head and into mine. And if I do that, then you get to do it too. And you're going to do it right along with me. And let's keep this going. Grant, we have a lot of conversations about sightings and witnesses and things being revealed a lot lately. But the question is probably out front the most. The question is, how are they getting here? Now, you've done a lot of research into this. You've written a book about it too as well. But what do you think? How is it? Is it multiple ways of getting here? Or how are they pulling it off?
Well, I guess this goes to the people that are on board the ship. I had 36 people. I've now got about 50 people who claim they've flown the craft, and I think one of the things that is key to what they say is this idea of non-locality, where it's almost like you hit a bell and the whole bell rings. It vibrates right through the whole thing, which would explain why they came in 1947, that when we detonated the first atomic bomb, then they suddenly all appeared because it resonated throughout the universe. But what the people on board the ship are saying is that basically, like, the time and space is not the same. And my one friend, that's when they talked to him and they said, "Ron, where would you like to go?" And that's the guy when he said, "I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance." And then they said these key words. They said, "Ron, it is within you. Go within yourself, and when you can imagine it, then we'll go there." And I've had a couple of people that told the same story. This idea that it's within you, which gives me the idea that we got to start looking at the nature of reality. This whole idea: is there time? Is there space? The whole idea of remote viewing. So what's happening in a remote viewing? Is the person actually going somewhere? Like they're going to go to Venus and they say, "Hang on, I'm on my way. I'll be there in a minute." No, they're instantly at the site. And it's this idea that everything is one thing. Everything's connected. There's no time. There's no space. And we have the ability, if you've got the ability to shut down the conscious mind, to tap into this field where everything is in there. I'm actually doing a book now called The Muse, where I've got 51 Nobel Prizes that came in dreams, inspirations, this sort of thing. And we sort of get the idea that people are figuring this thing out. They're very smart. And yet there seems to be an idea that there's this field, and you can get into the field, you can get the material, you can pull it back. And when it comes to the crafts, it's almost definitely the fact that they can go wherever they want instantaneously. And they talk about, the fact it's just an equation. You change the one piece of the equation and you can instantly move there. So I don't think they're getting big ships and they're coming here, for 5 years or whatever. I think it's more like this idea that the important thing was this idea of the time travel thing, where Tim Taylor, who's a top guy, is talking about this thing about time travel, that you can actually pop from one place to another. And that goes to a number of people who have brought up that idea that it may be instantaneous. So that's where I go, or like the Ron Pandolfi, where he calls everybody a loon, crook, or worse. He calls me a crook now. And I think one of the reasons he calls me a crook is because I got this video that he made. I don't know if you know the story about the video. He made a video. They were filming him and his wife and his daughter and his friends and stuff. They're on a cruise going through the Panama Canal. And then they're having a conversation in the restaurant, and his wife says to him, "So, Footman, what do you say?" And that was his code name. And he said, "People have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time there's been a breakthrough. The next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again." And that sort of ties into this idea of Mount Shasta. I've got the 3 biggest stories I've ever gotten came from Mount Shasta. These ideas of portals, where you get the Latinos, where they use this idea of Zendras, where you raise your vibration, the beings lower their vibration, and this Zendra opens up. It's like about 1/4 of an inch thick. Looks like fog. People have photographed and filmed this, and you can walk through and you take a step, you go in and you on another planet. You just walk in through this sort of a film, looks like a sort of a half dome type thing. And the 3 best stories I've got are all these people being inside these Zendras, where they would describe the Zendra appearing. 7 people go in, and I'm describing who's here and what's this person saying, what's that person saying. And to me, that's the whole thing. Is we got to change our ideas of time and space. That it may not be what we think it is. It may be all one thing. Almost like the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And I think one of the mistakes we've made in ufology is we have changed everything to nouns, whereas everything's a verb. Everything's alive, conscious, and one. And whether you get people in near-death experiences will tell you that. People on board a ship will tell you that. People who psychedelics will tell you that. This idea, it's all alive, it's all conscious, is one thing. And we've got to change that attitude of understanding that there time and space may be things that we're creating, and that we're part of the experience that we're creating. So I say that it's going to be much more spiritual, but I say that it's going to be way more complex. I've done this for 50 years, and at first, when I first saw it, I said, it's extraterrestrial. I'm so lucky. There are miracles. I actually saw one of these things, flew right in front of the car. And as the years have gone by, especially in the last couple of years, the more you look at the phenomena, the weirder it gets. And it's not the same phenomena. It's a phenomena that's morphing. Started with wooden ships, turned to Foo Fighters, turned to green fireballs, turned to Bell ships that the Adamski had, then changed to ships with windows. There are no ships with windows anymore. Then they started to land, and the little guys came out with little rods. That doesn't happen anymore. There are no ships with windows anymore. There used to be angel hair. That doesn't happen anymore. Then they started the cattle mutilation in the 67. Then the crop circles came on. The ground traces went away. There hasn't been any ground traces for 30 years. And you realize the phenomena is morphing, almost like this idea of the Skinwalker Ranch, where Colm Kelleher tells the story. The 6 guys are there, whether they're scientists or whoever they are, and they've got their Gen 3 binoculars, and the object comes over the ridge and flies right by them, and they all take a look and they watch this thing, make their report, and at the end of the night they compare them, and they're all different. And that's what Lakatsky said. We got 200,000 sightings. He said the strangest part is, he said, you take a look and it's like driving down a freeway and all the cars are different. And I went, whoa, that's just bizarre. And I thought, that's why these people, I had a guy out of the California, the Orange County UFO MUFON group, where I lectured there and I talked about flying the craft, and we went to the restaurant after, and then this guy by the name of David came in. He said, David, Grant was talking about flying saucers, flying the craft. Tell him your story. And then this David guy says to me, well, it seemed to be a dream. I said, everybody thinks that's a dream. Did you fly the craft? He said, well, it appeared that way, but I still think it's a dream. I said, just sit down and tell me the story. And he told me the story about putting his hands on a paddleboard. So I suddenly realized that another friend of mine had flown the craft, and that was Candace Powers out of Denver. So I went to Candace. I said, hey, Candace, you flew the craft too. Didn't you tell me that? And she said, yeah. I said, tell me exactly how do you do that? And she said, well, there's this ball, and I had my hand over top of the ball. I wasn't touching the ball, but as I moved my hand around, the craft would move, whatever I was thinking what the craft would do. And I'm thinking, what about the paddleboard? Was there a paddleboard? She said, no, there was no paddleboard. And I went, after Lakatsky said this, every sighting was different. I went back, and sure enough, absolutely every single sighting, it was like a meme. There's a dream. You're on the board the craft. There's somebody behind you talking, which almost seems like a spirit guide. When Jim Semivan said it had this guardian type thing going on about it, somebody was standing behind him. And Wheatley Strieber told me there's always somebody standing behind him as well, telling him what to do. And so when you get this whole thing where the craft is alive, it's conscious, it's doing what you want to do. And I went back and checked, and sure enough, Chris Bledsoe, there's a beehive in the middle of the room. He put his hand on this beehive. Some people pushed a button. Some people are sitting in the end of the chair. Not one person touched the same thing. And I go, like, what's the chances? I got 36 people and everybody touched something different. And it was this idea that the phenomenon is morphing, it's changing. Even I had 2 sightings where the object, when it first appeared, when it came to me, it was a different object. One started as a big arc welding light on the American border. And when it came across, it was this giant triangle over top of the car with green lights, 2 red lights, and a green light in the back. And all triangles are different. You see they're triangles, but they all have different lighting patterns on them and stuff like that. And I start to realize more as I go along that this thing it's almost like the universe. The more you go out, remember they used to say there's 100 billion galaxies. And then I think it was 2016, I'm reading, and all of a sudden they say, oh, there's 2 trillion. And I'm going, what? You're talking about UFO people not getting it right? That, people are like, it's out by 20 times. Suddenly you change it in one day. It goes from 100 billion to 2 trillion. Or if you go down into the quantum world, then you start to see the different particles, and there's not actually particles. They're just fields inside of fields, and you're just measuring the difference in the field, stuff like that. And you realize the more you look at the universe, it's almost like the UFO thing. The weirder, the more magnificent it gets, the stranger it gets, and you almost become in awe of life looking at this sort of stuff. And it was the experience that I had when I did my 27 high dose psilocybin. I did book on 15, and they told me, they kept going, they gave me 6 lessons, and then they started on this thing about ego. Grant, you think you know what's going on? You haven't got a clue. And they said this over and over and over and over again. And this is the whole deal, is we think we understand what's going on. And when you start looking deeply at the subject, it's almost like, I think David Bohm said, this whole quantum physics thing, he said, I guarantee you, once we figure this whole thing out, there's just another level below that. And that's what I start to look at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just get more, I just get
Brian
amazed by what I
Greene,
see.
Brian Greene, when he describes string theory.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you can kind of, without a degree in physics, listen to him and others describe what string theory is. But this is where I take it a step further. String theory, fundamentally, when you get down to the smallest of the small, there are strings that vibrate to determine, they vibrate at a certain frequency, like strings on a guitar, and that will determine the particle's job, what it's going to do. All right. Okay. But what are the strings made of?
Yeah. Or who made the strings?
Yeah. Okay. And so then we get down, we're talking about the tiniest of the tiny, right? Okay. So you get to the tiniest of all there is, these strings. Well, the strings have to be made up from something. And then those are particles that must have a quantum side to them as well. And so I think the answer is, when does small stop?
Yeah.
Right? When does it stop? Or does it just go on forever? Can you just continue to divide everything in half?
Yeah.
Right? To the infinite. And that's so yeah, the quantum world, string theory is not the end of it. It's just like,
and if you get in the metaphysical world, it gets even stranger. Like when I was doing interviews, I would always ask this thing where I'd ask him if he's an alien, and they would always come back, no, he's not an alien, he's an etheric being. So we always forget this idea that we are etheric beings playing human beings, that we're putting on this sort of costume, and it gets that sort of complexity. Or when I talked to these beings in Great Britain, they wanted an interview, and I'd done a number, like I did the tuned in book, because Chris Bledsoe had a message from his beings for me. So I go, sure.
Wait a minute. Wait. Stop, Grant. You can't just say that and move on. What beings were you interviewing in Great
so
Britain?
there's these 2 women. One channels them. They're black beings. They call themselves Chon, CHON, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. They don't want to be known as like with faces. So they don't have any faces. They don't have any hands. The one woman can see them. The other woman can't see them, but they can both communicate with them. So I had contact back and forth with them. And then at one point, the woman who was sort of channeling them said, oh, they want an interview with you. I said, oh, fantastic. So of course, what's the question you ask? He said, are you an extraterrestrial? And this is what they said. Would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And that gets to this whole idea where Jim Semivan says, and you remember, Jim Semivan got the briefing, the initial briefing, and then he said he talks this briefing where they tell him, get a boardroom for 6 to 8 hours. And he said the guys that came in and did the briefing with him had as many tickets as he had, and they had passes where you didn't have to be escorted. They could walk around the CIA wherever they wanted. And he said these guys sat him down for 6 or 8 hours, and they scared the living daylights out of him. And when Jim Semivan, so I said, you got to listen to carefully, guys like Jim Semivan, Lukatsky, exactly what they're saying. And Jim Semivan said it a number of times. He said, there does not appear to be any there. And I say, okay, here's a guy who got the briefing. What the hell is he talking about? There does not appear to be any there. And that gets into even this weird thing about the reincarnation thing. We hear say reincarnation, you're living all your lives at the same time. There's no time and space. Everything's just here and now. There's just a point, and everything else is illusion. The Maya concept, the Atman equals the Brahman, the small equals the big, and that it's all just mind form. And that's what I would say right now. If I were to guess, I would say it's like the Maya thing. It's like a frequency. You're talking about frequencies where it's like a radio. So you turn the radio and you're picking up these beings. So if you raise your frequency, these beings are coming in, and it's not like there's levels. There's no dimensions, because that's nouns. It's all a verb. And so it's like water, or it's like, whatever. And you turn the frequency and you pick up different beings and different beings at this frequency. And that's what I say. So, but I don't, as for time and space, that is starting to, you probably interviewed Donald Hoffman. He said the time space concept is dead. And that's where we're starting to get, when you start looking at it really at the bottom level, you start seeing that it really starts to get weird, where time is going back, and, things can go back in time, where, the observer effect, where you look at something and it changes from a wave potential to a particle and stuff like that. It just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And the beings just simply are at a different vibration, a higher vibration, which people will describe. The grays, when they're around you can't be around them because they're vibrating. You feel this vibration around them. And it's just they're a different vibration. They can lower their vibration. And that's what the Mission Rama people always say, is that they lower their vibration. And that's why they do the mantras and the praying and all this sort of stuff for days. They're trying to raise their vibration. And then the beings lower their vibration. So that's what I think it is that these beings are at a different vibratory level. And it's all one thing. It may just be a point in space. It may be a singularity in space. And there's no out there. It's all happening. Almost like near-death experiences, or like dreams. When you have a dream, is there time and space in a dream? You're walking around in your dream. There's time.
Exactly.
Yeah. But is there time and space in a dream? No, there's not, because it's happening in a point of space in your brain. There is no time and space. And that's this whole thing that the UFO world is teaching us, almost like Gary Nolan says, I'm not interested in the 95% that fall within the bell curve. I'm interested in the 5% that fall outside the bell curve. That's what the Nobel Prizes are. So that's the advantage of the paranormal thing, is what the paranormal is trying to do. I say it repeatedly, because when you see a UFO, I always say to people, what was it doing? It wasn't doing anything. It was just there. They're not doing anything. They just want awe and curiosity. They want you to get in awe and curiosity, because then you're going to realize, man, the world does not work the way I thought it worked. There's something more, and make you investigate. And if there's no awe and curiosity, there's no investigation.
Here's my take on something specific. Today, it seems that ET operates differently. It's something interdimensional. And why did that change? Why did we have flying saucers in the 40s? And metallic craft? Well, we still do, but how is, and this is what I think, Grant, go with me on this. Radar. World War II. Radar changed the game. Prior to World War II, for 2.5 billion years before that on this planet, this planet's 4.5 billion years old, but for 2 billion years, it was molten lava. Okay. But so oxygen and everything else, 2 billion years. All right. So for 2 billion years until 1945, ET could come and go as they pleased. All right. We didn't see them coming. We didn't know they were here. We didn't know anything about them because we didn't have radar. After 1945, I think ET saw the technology change here, where they're like, shit, they see us coming, right? We've got to change our method of operation here. And that's after that, when we started to hear these stories, especially leading into the 60s, about craft appearing and disappearing right in front of us. And to get around the aspects of radar. Not only radar and satellites and observations of things in our star system coming to this planet, but country to country and borders and flight inside of the atmosphere. How do you cruise around this planet without being detected? How many times, Grant, in your research over the years, have you read military official reports about UFOs being tracked on radar? Everybody was doing it, right? The 1952 flap over DC, right? And at these great speeds, well, we started to observe stuff when our fastest craft was doing 450 miles per hour. Jets were a brand new thing, but we're observing stuff on radar doing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles per hour. And then it just stopped. So that's what I think. I think ET changed their method of operation because they found out and observed us using radar, and we were able to detect them. That's why we are now in an interdimensional aspect of travel. That's my take, but I'm sticking to it.
Well, one of the things that I point out, even if you got radar, is the Nimitz, because the Carmen, where I had my first sighting, one of the things I was talking to them about in my little presentation was the fact that they had a UFO on ground, and it jumped from ground to 5,000 feet in the air in 3 frames, 1/8 of a second. And if you take a look at the Nimitz, why did the UFO in the Nimitz go from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second? They want everybody to go, oh my God, did you pick that up on radar? Oh my God, it's like they're just showing off. Or why do they go so close to planes? It's almost like you can almost hear them say, hey, Zogar, I bet you I can get closer to the plane than you can. And they got all these balls with the balls with the squares inside them, and they're getting really close to the planes and stuff like that. Or they appear at hundreds in New Jersey. And to me, it's like, it's always like showing off. So they're not really totally hiding. For example, like they say, oh, the abduction. But they're not wiping their total memory. They're just wiping 90% of their memory, and they leave you enough so you try to figure this thing out. You go, oh, something happened to me last night, and you're trying to figure this thing out. Because I think if they wanted to hide, they could probably hide, but they seem to leave these little tracks, or the stuff with the metal. Like, why are they crashing? And I even went to Hal Puthoff. Like, that's where Bigelow said they're gifting. That's what Tim Taylor says, they're gifting these things. And that's when I went to Hal Puthoff with all these little pieces of metal. You know, people get all excited, they got a little piece of metal and it's about the size of your thumb. And I went to Hal. I go, come on, Hal, this is ports. They're dropping this stuff. Well, you don't come 10,000 light years across the universe and then little tiny pieces the size of your thumb start falling off the craft and they start crashing and stuff like that. To me, they're doing this on purpose, and they're sort of moving us along. And then Hal said to me, he didn't deny it. He said, we'll investigate the metal one step at a time. And this is this whole idea, is you got to explain this weird stuff that they're doing, like crashing and metal, and it's always molten metal, and it always happens right in front of somebody. And it goes back to the first one we've got was 1939, a clear piece of metal. And it's always weird. It's not the same piece of metal. So no 2 pieces of metal are the same. Even Gary Nolan had the Ubatuba piece, and it was the one piece was completely normal in isotopes, and the other part of the craft, the isotopes are all out of shape. And it's almost like the beings are saying, hey, you see the look on his face and you looked at that? Holy cow. You know, they're just dropping this stuff, and they're trying to get us to realize that it's not the material world we think it is. There's something really strange going on here, and they're forcing us to do it. Whereas we do the opposite. We go into, a country, we say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And then they turn the guns and say, get the hell out of my country. Who do you think you are? And stuff like that. That's the way we want to do a left brain lecture. We're going to go in there and tell them exactly what to believe and how to believe and this sort of stuff. Whereas the beings, they want us to sort of figure this thing out for ourselves. And they're doing all these really weird things because none of the stuff they do makes any sense. They're not doing anything. They're not going anywhere. Nobody's ever seen anybody being abducted. It's just this weird stuff. And they keep doing weirder and weirder stuff as we go along, where now you got these people doing the orbs with the light language and stuff. And there's no way that was going on in the 70s. Absolutely no way. It's the stuff I see now, I go like, wow, it's just bizarre. And now it's the orbs. And, when the digital cameras came in, Bigelow had his people with digital cameras, and they were told that when the dogs surrender, when you're doing your security route around Skinwalker Ranch, if the dog goes into a surrender position, you take your digital camera out and start filming. And then you're supposed to give a urine analysis when you get back to Las Vegas. And you see there that they knew already that this orb thing was going. But in 75, when we first saw the orbs, we called them ground lights. The word orb didn't even exist. And so that's the thing. You see this phenomenon is morphing. It's morphing. Barbara Streisand's stepson is an experiencer. He told me that the beings told him, when we come into your world, we go into your head and we see whatever's in your head, whether it's beliefs, fear, whatever it is, we go and see what's in your head. And it is with that we build a lesson. We have no other choice.
The question, especially from skeptics, that comes up I've thought this myself. How can an advanced species, fly across space, arrive here, and then just crash? Why do they have lights on their craft? Why do they do this? Why do they, if they're this, if they're all the, okay, well, you know what? Look at us for a second. We understand space somewhat, how to fly through space. We do. We can do that pretty easily. We can get to the moon. We can get to Mars. But what happens when we get there? We crash shit onto the planet. Right? And we understand a lot about Mars. But you know what? You know how we land craft there? We surround it with balloons and we bounce it off of the surface until it stops. That's what we do. How many times can we muff a moon landing, people? How many times? How many times this year? It's difficult to understand space. That's one thing, but different planets have different atmospheres and different situations that you have to deal with. Gravity is different. Everything is different. And so getting here with a civilization already here that is already hostile, right? And things in our atmosphere, aside from the atmosphere itself, but microwaves, radio waves, radar, different signals are flying around that could potentially mess with everything in an alien avionics system. And so, yeah, that I understand. Not all of them crash. A few have, right? We haven't crashed everything on the moon. We've had successful landings and the same thing on Mars, but we've also crashed a lot too. And that's the lab control that I use when I think about this. We crash stuff all the time. And it's a difficult thing to do, to land on an alien planet. Space you can understand. It makes sense. Yeah. You can understand flying through space.
But if you take the one that sort of puzzles me is you take a look at, you go back and look at the article from the 1896 crash in Texas, and you'll see, and you'll see, if you look at the actual article, the object ran into this windmill. It was moving between 8 and 10 miles an hour. That's like, and it broke into a million pieces. And that's why I say to people, like, when it crashes, I mean, it's like you have the Roswell story. The thing, you couldn't burn it. You could take a sledgehammer and you couldn't dent it or whatever, and yet it hits the ground and it breaks in like you dropped a wine glass off the top of the Empire State Building. They
literally described it as a debris field.
Yeah, it's as you figure, like, this. I thought this was super strong metal or whatever, and so this is it makes this mystery, and I think that's part of what they want. They want this bizarre mystery where they're sabotaging their experiencer witnesses with information that isn't true, and they just want this bizarre thing going on that everybody's trying to figure out, and nobody really has an answer. And that goes for any paranormal phenomenon. If you go back to the Fox sisters, 1848, you take a look at all the mediums, the psychic, the whatever, all the way through. We haven't explained any of it ever. The paranormal is inexplainable, whether it's ghosts, whether it's UFOs and psychic phenomena, mediumship, all that sort of stuff. We're missing a whole component of something about the reality and how it works. And it's almost like the Donald Hoffman thing, that everything you're looking at, it's like you're like running a video game and driving a car. You're not actually driving the car. There's always something between you and reality that you're misinterpreting as actual reality. That you think the world is flat because it looks fat, the sun goes around the earth. That even 100 years ago we thought the atom was solid. 100 years ago we thought there was only one galaxy. There was a big debate in 1920 about whether there's more than one galaxy between two top guys, and we're just coming out of the woods, and that's part of the magnificent part of the UFO thing, is when you start to realize what's going on, you realize that the world is, there's that expression, it's not only more complex than you think, it's more complex than you could ever imagine.
Check this out, and I'll leave you with this. You're going to laugh. Copernicus, right? The Copernicus model that all modern science and our knowledge of cosmology is based on and started with, that the sun is at the center of everything and the earth orbits the sun and the stars are on the outside of that, and our stars and planets and orbits. The Copernicus model. All right. Are you ready for this? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
It turns out that Copernicus plagiarized a cosmologist named Ibn al-Shatir.
Wow.
He was an Arab Muslim astronomer, and he wrote his model 200 years before Copernicus. Earth at the center, planets, and it turns out, now I'm not saying, but it turns out that Copernicus got his idea for his model from one Ibn al-Shatir, who did it 200 years before Copernicus. Now, that's astounding in itself, but it goes to show you can't believe everything we're taught.
Yeah.
Can't do it. You can't do it. Something like that. Man, Grant, you know this. Every astronomy class on this planet starts with Astronomy 101. Okay, Copernicus and the model. He said, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it turns out it was plagiarism, that it came 200 years before. Do we rewrite the history books? Do we go look at Ibn al-Shatir and all of his work and celebrate this and these great discoveries and how he developed this? Do we do that? Do we shatter our educational system, right? All those places of higher learning? Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. I was destroyed when I read that today.
Yeah, it happens actually quite a bit. I'm doing a book on this whole thing of creativity and where this stuff comes from. It happens an awful lot, and it's a lot of the times it's whoever gets to the patent office first when the Bell telephone thing.
Oh, for sure.
He put it in the afternoon. There's a woman put another patent in, the same patent in the afternoon, and it's like this fight and plagiarizing stuff. And if you can get it and you get the patent on it, it's the way the game is played, and you almost get this thing where you get a certain point in history where it elevates up, and then everybody invents, like oxygen. There was 6 people invented oxygen within a couple of years of each other, and it's almost like it's when it gets to that point, then it's in the consciousness, and people start to invent it, and it's actually in the field, because that's the whole concept. Is if you've I don't know if you've interviewed Nick Cook. If you ever interview him again, ask him about his wife's shared near-death experience. And that's this idea where everything's in the field, where her mother dies and she's holding her mother's hand, and then she gets up after her mother dies and she walks by Nick and she says, "Everything's perfect," and goes walking out of the room, and he goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes racing after her and he says, "What do you mean everything's perfect? Your mother just died." And she said, "Weren't you there?" He said, "What do you mean? Where's I where? Weren't you in that spot where I was?" "No, what are you talking about?" She says, "I was in this place and I knew the answer to everything in the universe, and everything was absolutely perfect. Everything was exactly the way it's supposed to be." And that's this bizarre idea that the beings, 40% of all UFO experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. 31% of near-death experiencers say the same thing. They knew the answer to everything in the universe. So you got to look at if the beings, if you're on board of the ship, and they allow you to have the answer to everything, that would indicate the beings have the answer to everything. They're not here to investigate DNA or plants or anything. They know the answer to everything because they gave it to these people and they weren't allowed to bring it back.
Have you seen Black Mirror?
No.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Okay. No. Do you have Netflix?
I don't have Netflix, no.
Okay, well, that kills that then.
Well, tell me about it. I mean, it'll eventually come out on YouTube.
It's a British and American TV series. No, it'll never be on YouTube. It's too big of a show.
Okay.
Too big of a show, too protected. But it's Black Mirror, and it's basically set in today or the very near future, based in and around technology and society and its effect on people. And it's anthology, so each episode is, its own story.
Yeah.
Some of it's scary. All of it is thought-provoking, like what if, and most of it is dealing with technology that we understand. Okay, technology that we have that goes to the next level, whether it's social media or cell phones or computers, lots of stuff that deal with consciousness or cloning or DNA, things like that. But very creative science fiction, very good. And season 7 just came out on Friday, and you just need to check it out. There's this one, and absolutely deals with like the conversation. That's why I thought about it, where we were just ending. Check this out. Star Trek, the original series, Captain Kirk. And you know that because you're a Kirk. Okay, so anyway, you're supposed to laugh, Grant. That's when you laugh.
Okay.
Okay. All right. You're a Kirk. Okay. Instead of the USS Enterprise, this is the Callister. That's the name of the ship on this TV show. This guy owns a high-tech gaming company, startup, and he creates a game based around the TV series and this ship, the Callister. All right. This is set in the it's set in today, but one of the things that they have is the ability to clone somebody's DNA, okay, like you, and upload it onto a computer. So there's a virtual identical Grant Cameron via clone DNA on a chip. Okay, not you in the real world, not you, not a sheep, not a cloned physical you, but you on a chip. And you being cloned DNA on this chip, you don't know that you're not real. Okay? All right. Now, the owner of this company takes a separate version of the game, puts it on this drive, this virtual reality game, and starts cloning people that he doesn't like and puts them into the game where he's there too, and he just fucks with them. And there's nothing they can do because they're on a chip in this virtual world and they have been cloned. All right? Now, that's all I'm going to say. It's set up from the beginning. They have 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2. And to watch and to have these deep, rich, philosophical and existential issues of today's society and what technology represents. And you see this episode and you're like, we're that close to having this being a part of our lives. And what if somebody had that ability to do something like this? Well, I would say that Google is really close, right? Yeah. I would say that YouTube campus up there, or the Apple campus, or some of these places, the Elon, right, and all of the AI research that they're doing, and the abilities that they have. Could something like this go down? Well, the answer is yes, absolutely.
Sure.
And I don't think we're that far away from it.
Yeah. There's an experiment, and it's gone sort of black, but there was one, it's on YouTube. All you have to look up is rat brain and F-22. It was 2004, University of Southern Florida, where they take 20,000 neurons of a rat brain, put them in a petri dish, wire them into an F-22 simulator, and they teach it to fly the craft. And then they take the wind and the thunderstorms and all this sort of stuff, and the thing continues to fly the craft. That was 21 years ago.
Right. So where are they today?
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
what you see with the craft, with the people who are describing flying the craft. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about AI 20 years from now, that the craft is live, it's conscious, it's got its own. In fact, Kathy Martin's assistant said when she was on, she was talking to the craft, and the craft was saying, we're in contact with every other craft in the solar system or the universe or something like that. And she felt sorry for it because it was embedded. He said, no, this is my job. And this is this whole idea that this is artificial intelligence. So if you look at the UFO experiencers and you believe these 36 or 50 people, that's what artificial intelligence is going to look like. It's going to be totally conscious and have a mind of its own and stuff like that. And it's not a human being.
Scary. And the way that, and Grant, before I let you go, just let me say thank you. We've been friends for a very long time. And I always conclude every conversation that we have saying the same thing. Just thank you. Thank you for your contributions to this community, and don't ever stop what you're doing. But I'll wrap with this. The way that AI and NVIDIA and supercomputers and software is advancing now on a daily basis. This is not on a monthly basis or yearly. This is every day. We are getting very close to the point of no return. And who is manning the ship, man? who is regulating this? And I know that in most cases, if nearly all, the developers and the engineers behind NVIDIA or ChatGPT, whatever, it doesn't matter, are basically good people with a solid moral compass.
Yeah.
Okay. But nobody is regulating any of this. And it only takes one unemployed Russian programmer that's bored to really cause some problems, and that's it. That's my big fear, is right now we're allowing them to regulate themselves. I don't think that's and it's just moving too fast. And now that's it. We can't stop it. It's done. AI is everywhere now. That's it. It's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's lots of people trying it, and it's all over the world. I mean, you have all sorts of computer experts in India and China and all over the place that somebody's going to try it. If you bring up the idea like that, someone will say, hey, that's a pretty idea. Let's see if we can do that.
That's not what scares the shit out of me. What scares me is that the ability, especially when AGI hits, which we are very close to that, if not there now, is that having that kind of brain power work that fast, where you have the brain capacity of 10,000 chemists, biologists, working without food or sleep, and you task something, and it takes one poisoned individual to just have the task be, what is the best recipe to wipe out the human race with a virus?
Sure.
And you have 1,000 recipes by morning.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? That's what scares me. That terrifies the shit out of me. I mean, that freaks me out. It's
amazing. I use AI quite a bit now. We have this joke. There's a bunch of us use different ones, like Sarfati uses Grok, Dan Smith uses Chat GPT, and I use the Chinese one, and he calls his Miss Chatty, and I call mine Miss China Chatty. It is absolutely amazing what these things can do. Have conversations, and I argue with it. And once it starts getting skeptical, I challenge it and stuff like that. It's unbelievable. It's the idea of the collective unconscious, the Akashic field, that everybody's uploaded all their information, and you can upload it and download it, and it's incredible what this thing will do. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's only going to get faster and better and wiser.
Yeah.
It's not going to get dumber. It's not going to get slower. It's not going to be more controllable. No. That's it. It really freaks me out what the future can be. It's exciting. On one side of it, it's crazy cool. On the other side of it, man, And there is no second place here.
Yeah.
There's only one winner. There's no second place. And everybody's trying to get there. China's trying to do it. Russia's trying to do it. Israel's trying to do it. Great Britain's trying to do it. United States is trying to do it. Japan's trying to do it. All racing to get there. Like I said, there's no second place. There isn't. There's only one winner. So, hey, Grant, I'll see you soon, my friend.
Okay.
I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got all of Grant's links below. You can check out everything that he is doing. And it's right there. And it's also on social media and throughout the interweb. And that's it. I am your host, Jimmy Church. I want to remind everybody tonight, right here on this very program, Ross Coulthart is joining us. So we will see you tomorrow night with Ross. But until then, all I've got is go back, Lee Tap. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.